Story 1. I thought it was awesome I could hang out at my best friend's house. Her mom pretty much left us unsupervised to get drunk on her back porch with the neighbors. My friend and I would stay up until all hours of the night in middle and high school talking to strangers on the internet. Story 2. I thought we were having a big 2-month-long sleepover with my friend and his family when I was 6. Apparently, my mother and I were homeless. Story 3. One summer, my cousin and I spent almost the entire season at a caravan on a site in Wales. Her stepfather took us. It was owned by his parents. We had a wonderful time. We went to every disco, swam every day, played on the beach, and attended fairs and shows. I did not realize until adulthood that we were sent there because her mother was seriously ill. She had an operation the day after we left and was in recovery for almost 3 months. It was the best summer we had as children. It upset me when I realized my little 7-year-old cousin could have returned to no mother. I also thought a lot about the fun we were having while nanny and was going through a difficult time. Story 4. My biological father allowed me to use power tools without supervision. I remember playing with the jigsaw, sitting on the garage floor, and sawing away at a piece of board in my lap. How I managed not to injure my legs is a mystery to me or to my guardian angel working overtime. Story 5. The first person I had a sexual relationship with was my high school French teacher. I was 16 years old, and she was 36. At the time, it seemed exciting. Years later, I realized it was inappropriate. Story 6. I thought I was cool because I was always dating older men. I was 15 to 16 years old dating men over 25 years old. Looking back, it was disgusting. Story 7. When I talk about 99% of my childhood at work, I see the stunned look on people's faces. To me, that was just a normal childhood. Story 8. I loved that I got to be alone for hours on end and could play in peace to my heart's content. I felt neglected. Story 9. When my older cousin wanted to hang out with me, it was a prime example of why age-appropriate sex education is so important. Story 10. When I was about 10 or 11, my best friend and I used to spend all day in the summer hanging out because we both had single mothers who worked full-time jobs. We thought it was so cool that the man across the street from my friend, who was probably in his 20s or 30s, would have us over, show us adult videos, and let us look at his magazines. That was completely inappropriate. Story 11. Pointing at disabled people in wheelchairs is not as funny as I thought when I was younger. It is actually very rude. Story 12. Surfing in the back of my father's truck while going 60 miles per hour down the highway at about 10 years old. Amazing then. Story 13. My dad always introduces me as his academically gifted child. Now I cannot stand the thought of failure or not being smart enough to an extreme level. Story 14. Christian youth groups with adults who are considered mentors but were actually predators. Story 15. I met a man at a campground while on vacation. He told me I was pretty and tried to kiss me, but we were interrupted. My mother kept very close watch over me until we left. She was right. I was 14 and he was 21. Story 16. Did pull-ups on the power lines. Come to think of it, I knew it was wrong back then too, but did it anyway. Story 17. My mother would arrange playdates or activities for me, which were rare for generally neglected Generation X children. I did not realize until I was older that she was keeping me busy while having relationships with other men. Story 18. I was in 3rd grade before I learned that you do not use death threats in everyday conversation with people. Given how home was, I literally thought that this was how people and families interacted with each other. Story 19. All the homophobic banter when I was a kid in the 1980s and 1990s. I would laugh along, then one day realized. Story 20. When I was 12, after my father died, my mother got a new boyfriend and moved in with him. I did not. I got to stay in our apartment. I lived by myself for 3 years. I only saw her once every few months, usually just to grab something she left behind or to yell at me for no reason. At the time, I thought it was great. Unlimited internet access, no bedtime, no rules. I do not necessarily remember it as a bad time, and I am glad she was not around, but with adult hindsight, it was severe neglect. After a few months, I had no food or water. My only meals came from school lunch. In the summer, I begged friends for food or tried to stay at their houses. I am surprised I even got myself to school, but my mother threatened to kill me if I started skipping. When I was out of options, I ate Swiss Miss hot chocolate powder dry and took shots of ketchup from the bottle to stop my stomach from hurting. I could not drink the lead-contaminated tap water. My mother did buy me a yearly supply of Mountain Dew, so that was all I got. My teeth were and still are destroyed. If you drink enough soda, you can develop sores in your mouth and stomach. I found out the hard way. When I got desperate, I would steal water from the corner store or hike a few miles to the library to use their water fountain. My grandmother finally took me in when I started high school. It was really hard adjusting to living with someone after that. It is a wonder I did not turn out too badly in the end. Story 21. I was 5 years old, and the babysitter could not get me to behave, so she let me stare at her bare skin under a blanket while she watched television. Story 22. I used to like getting wedgies from my brother. Not joking, it's true. I liked the pressure of the fabric pressing into me, and the pain inside my skin was only bad for about 20 seconds before I began chasing that sensation. When Mom realized what was happening, she put a hard stop to it quickly. I was about 6 years old at the time, so I didn't know any better. Looking back now as an adult, I can safely say that yes, that was inappropriate, though I was also a strange kid in general. Story 23. This older staff member at my elementary school was someone I had a friendship with. He talked and joked around with both girls and boys. He would make comments about my developing chest, which I took as a joke. Honestly, even though I later realized how inappropriate it was for him to speak to me that way. He said other questionable things too. I don't feel surprised for some reason. Story 24. Judging other children for not having a traditional nuclear family because, in many ways, I did not have one and was judged for it. Story 25. When my mother confided in me about her intimate life when I was 11, I think that might have influenced me to become sexually active at 12. Story 26. Had a spontaneous sleepover at the neighbor's house one night with all my older siblings, while our mom was on a work trip. I did not know until I was an adult that my dad was a severe alcoholic and came home drunk that night. We left him home alone to show how close he was to losing us. That was the last time he ever drank that much. Story 27. The one African-American person in every movie whose role was to be stereotypically loud, irate, or sassy. Think of the civilian driver in Speed or the counter attendant in National Treasure. Story 28. My drama teacher at school when I was about 12 or 13 used to make me sit on his lap at the beginning of lessons and he would bounce me up and down. We all thought it was funny and liked him as a teacher. 6 or 7 years later, when I ran into a couple of old classmates at the pub and it came up in conversation, one of them said, "Yeah, looking back that wasn't okay. We thought nothing of it at the time, but it was definitely wrong." Story 29. Had unrestricted internet access and no bedtime from a young age. My parents were workaholics who did not care as long as I was quiet. After all of my and real-life friends went to bed, I would stay up all night gaming and chatting with strangers online. It seemed cool at the time, but I was absolutely being groomed by creepy individuals twice my age. Story 30. I was parentified as a teenager. My mom was always a helicopter parent. I was homeschooled as a child after 4th grade, not because she thought I could get a better education that way, but because she didn't want me exposed to the world. I was rarely allowed to go do things with friends unless she was involved. After her and my dad split up, I suddenly became the man of the house. Physical tasks like lawn maintenance, household repairs, and so on became my responsibility. I understand that kids need age-related chores, and that's fine. But what wasn't okay was that my mom decided after her and my dad divorced that she was too old to start over and get a job and would just apply for disability. She was 42. Did she have an actual disability? No, unless you count generalized entitlement as a disability. She fought for her disability for 6 years. She finally got it, but guess who was working and supporting the household while she wasn't? My sister and me. That was normal for me at the time because I was the man of the house. But I was also a teenager who was too naive to realize I was being taken advantage of. Recently, my wife asked me, "What kind of job did your mom have when she and your dad split up?" I was like, job? She didn't get a job. My sister and I worked to support the household. My wife was blown away, but it was no big deal to me. Story 31. When my dad was buzzed and drove me around, we both thought it was so much fun when he wiggled the steering wheel, which made the car swerve and made me laugh a lot. In his defense, he did it on empty roads. He has not done it since the mid-1990s. Story 32. So many of the late 1990s and 2000s movies used gay people as the punchline for everything. For example, in Wedding Crashers, they made one man seem like a huge weirdo because he was gay. I somehow thought that was funny. Story 33. I do not know if I necessarily liked it, but the casual hatred that was expressed was notable. The use of the R word for people with intellectual disabilities, the casualness of saying that is so gay, and the thoughtlessness of how we stigmatized fat people in the late 1990s and early 2000s, the online bullying of Monica Lewinsky and others. It makes you realize it is not a surprise how we ended up here, only a slow slide. Story 34. That time I was about 4 or 5 years old, and my father, in a drunken rage, unloaded a gun magazine off our balcony into the sky because he was angry at my mother. Story 35. Growing up and realizing all the negative experiences you suffered could have been prevented by a parent who cared enough to try. Many things I thought were cool at the time because I was too young to understand were really parental failures. Story 36. Seatbelt laws were not enforced very strictly back in the 1990s. When we went on family road trips, I always rode in the back of our station wagon or the bed of our pickup truck, which did have a cover. There were just a bunch of pillows and blankets for comfort to prevent bouncing around too much. As an adult, I understand the safety concerns because I do not trust other drivers. However, I still remember having a lot of fun during the rides and miss that station wagons barely exist anymore. Story 37. When I was in second grade, I wanted to join a basketball league with friends. I played all the time anyway and was 6 inches taller than everyone at the time. My dad told me to play baseball instead because basketball was a black sport. I misread the question because I did not like it when I was younger either. Story 38. I enjoyed eating endless junk food when I was young, and it led to an unhealthy relationship with food as I grew up. My mother was a hoarder and refused to cook or clean. So once my sister and I had waited long enough for her to feel guilty, she would take us to McDonald's or Costco. We would load up on as much as we could because we did not know when we would get it again. We never had food in the fridge, yet she could take my sister and me to sit in a store while she shopped for hours. Everything in our life was single-use, including clothes and dishes. In those hungry moments as a child, when I could load up on mountains of junk food, my body was fed, but I have struggled to know how to feed myself since. I still get by. I am a graduate student in a distant town and doing okay as an adult, but I gain and lose a lot of weight all the time. Story 39. When I was in my early 20s, my best friend had introduced me to her friend, and we had a pregnancy scare. I stopped communicating with her, but later found out she was not pregnant. We reconnected, but it was only afterward that I realized how much I had emotionally hurt her, leaving her numb to everything and changing who she was. I still reflect on it. And if I could go back and meet my 20-year-old self, I would be very hard on myself because now I have a daughter. Story 40. I worked for free at a comic book shop because I was 12 and loved comics. The owner started to give me attention and free trading cards of adult film actresses. I thought with my 12-year-old brain, free pictures, and a stable father figure. No, I was being groomed. Story 41. My parents had me very young, and they lived on their own in a trailer park with me while still in high school. At every party, there was a different man who would be too drunk to leave, so they let him sleep on the floor in my room. Some nights, they would even get into my toddler bed with me. Story 42. Easy. Porn addiction, especially when the severity of it finally clicked. Getting aroused from the power button. This one surpasses every other by a long shot. Work in progress and going reasonably smoothly. Edit. Genuinely serious about this one, though it may have been flagged as inappropriate due to my tendency to talk lightheartedly about this subject. Story 43. When I was much younger, a girl of the same age on our street regularly performed oral sex on me, and I never thought much of it. In fact, it was somewhat of a bragging point in my mind. Now, looking back, I see it as an awful and embarrassing experience that I try to forget. Even though we both knew no better, it still feels strange and unpleasant. Story 44. Fooling around with my girlfriend's sister when she was out of town definitely messed up all three of our lives for the worse. Story 45. I loved fire. My friend and I used to hide in her room, grab all her mother's matches, light them and let them drop. I do not know how we did not burn the place down. Story 46. My friend's mother was very generous. She would buy us cigarettes and alcohol when we were about 16 years old. It was not until my late 20s that I realized what a negative influence she was. Story 47. Everyone in my childhood always thought I had the coolest mom because she let me do whatever I wanted. I was being neglected. Story 48. I was in first grade at the time and in the gym where everyone was sitting waiting for class to start. My coach said he had lost his glasses in the field, which was filled with tall grass, and needed me to help him find them. Only me. He kept trying to keep me close to him like I was talking skin to skin. Once we made it out there, I tried my best to find them as quickly as I could. I found them and he said he was going to give me money for helping him, but it was at his truck, which was about a minute's walk from the field. He had me walk with him and open his truck when one of the other coaches saw and screamed from across the field for me to run back. I got home, showed my mom the $1 the coach gave me, and told her everything. She freaked out and I was very confused. After that day, I never saw that coach again. I always wondered what would have happened if I stayed out there. Story 49. My brother rubbing his naked body against me to climax. I felt special and loved as a child. Then, of course, I realized just how wrong it was, and I am in therapy. It literally ruined my ability to have a healthy relationship, so I am single at 55. Story 50. Being practically completely unsupervised for a fair amount of time as a child, I would run around outside in my arguably bad neighborhood at 7 years old, doing whatever I wanted and talking to random strangers. It was so fun and cool as a child, but in hindsight, I got into some pretty dangerous situations often and could have been kidnapped or even died. Story 51. We lost our house when I was a kid, but a hotel down the road took us in for a few nights. At 6 years old, it felt like an adventure. It turns out that the hotel was a house for prostitution. Story 52. Breakfast for dinner or bits and bobs. We were too poor to properly feed ourselves, but Mom and Dad made it fun. Story 53. After coming home from school on September 11th, my mother tried to explain what had happened, and I said, maybe next they will blow up the harmful state of Texas. Thinking it was funny. I was 8, old enough to know better though. I deeply regret the naivety of that statement. My thoughtless response to one of the biggest tragedies in American history will always weigh on me as it should. Story 54. I was 25 messing around with a 19-year-old girl, but she was dating a 30-year-old guy at the time, which was creepy to me. Now, my daughter is 19. I would be livid if someone 6 to 11 years older than her was after her. Story 55. When I was little, I loved those family hugs where everyone piled on. I thought it was the coziest thing ever. But now, I cringe thinking about all the sweaty armpits and awkwardness. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.